Listen and relax. Crafting serenity, one audiobook at a time.
I would forgive him. He really did look serious when he was saying it. I couldn't help feeling a bit serious too. I know, Mina, you will think me a horrid flirt, though I couldn't help feeling a sort of exultation that he was number 2 in one day. And then, my dear, before I could say a word, he began pouring out a perfect torrent of love-making, laying his very heart and soul at my feet. He looked so earnest over it that I shall never again think that a man must be playful always and never earnest, because he is merry at times. I suppose he saw something in my face which checked him, for suddenly he stopped and said with a sort of manly fervour that I could have loved him for had I been free, "Lucy, you are an honest-hearted girl, I know. I should not be here speaking to you as I am now if I did not believe you, clean grit right through to the very depths of your soul. Tell me like one good fellow to another, is there anyone else you care for? And if there is, I'll never trouble you a hair's breadth again, but will be, if you will let me, a very faithful friend." My dear Mina, why are men so noble when we women are so little worthy of them? Here I was almost making fun of this great-hearted true gentleman. I burst into tears. I'm afraid, my dear, you will think this is a very sloppy letter in more ways than one. And I really felt very badly. Why can't they let a girl marry 3 men or as many as want her, and save all this trouble? But this is heresy, and I must not say it. I'm glad to say that though I was crying, I was unable to look into Mr. Morris's brave eyes, and I told him out straight. Yes, there is someone I love, though he has not told me yet that he even loves me. I was right to speak to him so frankly, for quite a light came into his face, and he put out both his hands and took mine. I think I put them into his and said in a hearty way, "That's my brave girl. It's better worth being late for a chance of winning than you being in time for any other girl in the world. Don't cry, my dear, if it's for me. I'm a hard nut to crack. I'll take it standing up. If that other fellow doesn't know his happiness, well, he better look for it soon, or he'll have to deal with me. Little girl, your honesty and pluck have made me a friend, and that's rarer than a lover. It's more unselfish anyhow. My dear, I'm going to have a pretty lonely walk between this and Kingdom Come. Won't you give me one kiss? It'll be something to keep off the darkness now and then. You can, you know, if you like, for that other good fellow. He must be a good fellow, my dear, and a fine fellow, or you could not love him. Hasn't spoken yet." That quite won me, Mina, for it was brave and sweet of him, and noble too, to a rival, wasn't it? And he so sad, so I leant over and kissed him. He stood up with my 2 hands in his, and as he looked down into my face, I'm afraid I was blushing very much, he said, "Little girl, hold your hand, and you have kissed me. If these things don't make us friends, nothing ever will. Thank you for your sweet honesty to me, and goodbye." He wrung my hand, and taking up his hat, went straight out of the room without looking back, without a tear or a quiver or a pause. I'm crying like a baby. Oh, why must a man like that be made unhappy when there are lots of girls about who would worship the very ground he trod on? I know I would if I were free, only I don't want to be free. My dear, this has quite upset me, and I feel I cannot write of happiness just at once, after telling you of it, and I don't wish to tell of the number 3 until it can be all happy. Ever your loving Lucy. P.S. Oh, about number 3. I needn't tell you of a number 3, need I? Besides, it was all so confused. It seemed only a moment from his coming into the room till both his arms were round me and he was kissing me. I am very, very happy, and I don't know what I have done to deserve it. I am not ungrateful to God for all his goodness to me in sending to me such a lover, such a husband, and such a friend. Goodbye. Dr. Seward's Diary. Kept in phonograph. 25th of May. Ebb tide and appetite today. Cannot eat, cannot rest, so diary instead. Since my rebuff of yesterday, I have a sort of empty feeling. Nothing in the world seems of sufficient importance to be worth the doing. As I knew that the only cure for this sort of thing was work, I went down among the patients. I picked out one who had afforded me a study of much interest. He is so quaint that I am determined to understand him as well as I can. Today I seem to get nearer than ever before to the heart of this mystery. I questioned him more fully than I have ever done, with a view to making myself master of the facts of his hallucination. In my manner of doing it there was now, I see, something of cruelty. I seemed to wish to keep him to the point of his madness, a thing which I avoid with a patience as I would the mouth of hell. Memo. Under what circumstances would I not avoid the pit of hell? Omnia Romane Venulia sunt. Hell has its price. Verb. Sat. If there be anything between this instinct, it will be valuable to trace it afterwards, accurately. So I'd better commence to do so. Therefore, R.M. Renfield, age 59. Sanguine temperament. Great physical strength. Morbidly excitable. Periods of gloom, ending in some fixed idea which I cannot make out. I presume that the sanguine temperament itself and the disturbing influence end in a mentally accomplished finish. Possibly a dangerous man, probably dangerous if unselfish. In selfish men, caution is as secure an armour for their foes as for themselves. What I think of on this point is, when self is the fixed point, the centripetal force is balanced with the centrifugal. When duty, cause, etc. is the fixed point, the latter force is paramount, and only an accident or a series of accidents can balance it. Letter, Quincy P. Morris to the Honourable Arthur Holmwood, 25th of May. My dear Art, we've told yarns by the campfire in the prairies, and dressed one another's wounds after trying a landing at the Marquises, and drunk health on the shore of Titicaca. There are more yarns to be told, and other wounds to be healed, and other health to be drunk. Won't you let this be at my campfire tomorrow night? I have no hesitation in asking you, as I know a certain lady is engaged to a certain dinner party, and that you are free. There will only be one other, our old pal in the career, Jack Seaward. He's coming too, and we both want to mingle our weeps over the wine cup, and drink the health of with all our hearts to the happiest man in the wide, wide world, who has won the noblest heart that God has made, and the best worth winning. We promise you a hearty welcome, and a loving greeting, and a health as true as your own right mind. We shall both swear to leave you at home if you drink too deep a certain pair of eyes. Come, yours as ever and always, Quincy P. Morris. Telegram from Arthur Holmwood to Quincy P. Morris, 26th of May. Count me in every time. I bear messages which will make both your ears tingle. Art. End of chapter 5. Chapter 6 of Dracula by Bram Stoker. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 6. Mina Murray's Journal. 24th of July, Whitby. Lucy met me at the station looking sweeter and lovelier than ever, and we drove up to the house at the Crescent in which they have rooms. This is such a lovely place. The little river, the Esk, runs through a deep valley which broadens out as it comes near the harbour. A great viaduct runs across with high piers, through which the view seems somehow further away than it really is. The valley is beautifully green, and it is so steep that when you are on the high land on either side, you look right across it, unless you are near enough to see down. The houses of the old town, the side away from us, are all red-roofed, and seem piled up one over the other anyhow, like the pictures we see of Nuremberg. Right over the town is the ruin of Whitby Abbey, which was sacked by the Danes, and which is the scene of part of Marmion, where the girl was built up in the wall. It is a most noble ruin of immense size and full of beautiful and romantic bits. There is a legend that a white lady is seen in one of the windows. Between it and the town there is another church, the parish one, round which is a big graveyard, all full of tombstones. This, to my mind, is the nicest spot in Whitby, for it lies right over the town and has a full view of the harbour and all up the bay to where the headland called Kettleness stretches out into the sea. It descends so steeply over the harbour that part of the bank has fallen away, and some of the graves have been destroyed. In one place, part of the stonework of the graves stretches out over the sandy pathway far below. There are walks with seats beside them through the churchyard, and people go and sit there all day long, looking at the beautiful view and enjoying the breeze. I shall come and sit here very often myself and work. Indeed, I am writing now with my book on my knee and listening to the talk of 3 old men who are sitting beside me. They seem to do nothing all day but sit up here and talk. The harbour lies below me, with on the far side one long granite wall stretching out into the sea, with a curve outwards at the end of it, in the middle of which is a lighthouse. A heavy sea wall runs along outside of it. On the near side the sea wall makes an elbow crooked inversely, and its end too has a lighthouse. Between the 2 piers there is a narrow opening into the harbour, which then suddenly widens. It's nice at high water, but when the tide is out it shoals away to nothing. There's merely the stream of the Esk running between banks of sand with rocks here and there. Outside the harbour on this side there rises for about half a mile a great reef, the sharp edge of which runs straight out from behind the south lighthouse. At the end of it is a buoy with a bell, which swings in bad weather and sends a mournful sound on the wind. They have a legend here that when a ship is lost, bells are heard out at sea. I must ask the old man about this. He's coming this way. He's a funny old man. He must be awfully old, for his face is all gnarled and twisted like the bark of a tree. He tells me that he's nearly 100, that he was a sailor in the Greenland fishing fleet when Waterloo was fought. He is, I am afraid, a very sceptical person, for when I asked him about the bells at sea and the White Lady at the Abbey, he said, very brusquely, "I wouldn't fash myself about them, miss. Them strings will all be wore out. Mind, I don't say there never was, but I do say there wasn't in my time. They'd be all very well for combers and trippers and the like, but not for a nice long lady like you. Them feet folks from York and Leeds, that'll always be eating cured herrings and drinking tea and looking out to buy cheap jet, would creed aught. I wonder, miss, who'd be bothered telling lies to them. Even the newspapers, which is full of fool talk." I thought he would be a good person to learn interesting things from, so I asked him if he would mind telling me something about the whale fishing in the old days. He was just settling himself to begin when the clock struck 6, whereupon he laboured to get up and said, "I must gang againwards home now, miss. My granddaughter doesn't like to be kept waiting when tea is ready, for it takes me time to crummy about the grease. For there be many of 'em, miss. I lack belly timber, surely by the clock." He hobbled away, and I could see him hurrying as well as he could down the steps. The steps are a great feature on the place. They lead from the town up to the church. There are hundreds of them, I do not know how many, and they wind up in a delicate curve. The slope is so gentle that a horse could easily walk up and down them. I think they must have originally had something to do with the Abbey. I shall go home too. Lucy went out visiting with her mother, and as they were only duty calls, I did not go. They will be home by this time. 1st of August. I came up here an hour ago with Lucy. We had a most interesting talk with my old friend and the 2 others who always come and join him. He is evidently Sir Oracle of them, and I should think must have been in his time a most dictatorial person. He will not admit anything and downfaces everybody. If he can't out-argue them, then he bullies them, and then takes their silence for agreement with his views. Lucy was looking sweetly pretty in a white lawn frock. She has just got a beautiful colour since she's been here. I noticed that the old men did not lose any time in coming up and sitting near her when we sat down. She is so sweet with old people. I think they all fell in love with her on the spot. Even my old man succumbed and did not contradict her, but gave me double share instead. I got him on the subject of legend, and he went off at once into a sort of sermon. I must try to remember and put it down. It'll be all fool talk, lock, stock and barrel. That's what it be, and naught else. These bands and wafts and bogus and bank guests and bar guests and bogies, and all of them is only to set bairns and dizzy women a beltering. They be naught but hair-blebs. They and all grims, the signs and warnings be all invented by parsons and ilsome butte bodies and railway touters to scare and scunner halflings and to get folks to do something that they don't other incline to it. It makes me ireful to think of them. Why, it's them that's not content with printing lies on paper and preaching them out of pulpits, does want to be cutting them on tombstones. Look here all around you, in what art ye will, all them stones yonder holding up their heads as well as they can out of their pride, is a cant simply tumbling down with weighted lies wrote about them. Here lies the body, or sacred to the memory, wrote on all of them. Yet in nigh half of them there bean't no bodies at all, and the memories of them bean't cared a pinch or a snuff about, much less sacred. Lies, all of them, nothing but lies of one kind or another. My God, but it'll be a queer scoldment on day of judgment when they come tumbling up with their death sarks, all grouped together, and trying to drag their tombstones with them to prove how good they was. Some of them trimming and dithering with their hands that doesn't and slippery from lying in sea, but they can't even keep their grip of them. I could see from the old fellow's self-satisfied air and the way in which he looked round for the approval of his cronies that he was showing off, so I put in a word to keep him going. "Oh, Mr. Swales, you can't be serious. Surely these tombstones are not all wrong." "Yabblins, there may be a poorish few not wrong, saving where they make out the people too good, for there be folk that do think a barnball be like the sea, if only it be their own. The whole thing be only lies. Now look you here, you come here a stranger, and you see this Kirkgath." I nodded, for I thought it better to assent, though I did not quite understand his dialect. I knew it had something to do with the church. He went on, "And you can say that all these stones be about folk that apt here snog and snog." I assented again. "Then that be just where the lie comes in. Why, there be scores of these lay beds to be tombed as old Dunn's backer box on Friday night." He nudged one of his companions and they all laughed. "And my God, how could they be otherwise? Look at that one. After Sabbath, the beer bank, read it." I went over and read. "Edward Spedlar, master mariner, murdered by pirates off the coast of Andreas, April 1854, age 30. When I came back, Mr. Swales went on. "Who brought him home, I wonder, to have him here? Murdered off the coast of Andreas? And you concerted his body lay under? Why, I could name you a dozen whose bones lie in the Greenland seas above." He pointed northwards. "Or where the currents may have drifted them. There be stains around us. You can with your young eyes read the small print of the lies from here. This Braithwaite Lowry, I knew his father, lost in the Lively off Greenland in 20. Or Andrew Woodhouse, drowned in the same seas in 1777. Or John Paxton, drowned off Cape Farewell a year later. Or old John Rawlings, whose grandfather sailed with me, drowned in the Gulf of Finland in 50. Do you think that all these men will have to make a rush to Whitby when the trumpet sounds? I have me other rhythms about it, I tell you that. When they got here, they'd be jumming and jostling one another. That way it'd be like a fight up on the ice in the old days, when we'd all be at one another from daylight to dark, and trying to tie up our cuts by the light of Aurora Borealis." This was evidently local pleasantry, for the old man cackled over it and his cronies joined in with gusto. But, I said, surely you're not quite correct, for you start on the assumption that all the poor people or their spirits will have to take their tombstones with them on the Day of Judgment. Do you think that will be really necessary? Well, what else be their tombstones for? Answer me that, miss. To please their relatives, I suppose. To please their relatives, you suppose? He said this with intense scorn. How will it please their relatives to know that lies is wrought over them, and that everybody in the place know that they be lies? He pointed to a stone at our feet, which had been laid down as a slab, on which the seat was rested, close to the edge of the cliff. Read the lies on that steam, he said. The letters were upside down to me from where I sat, but Lucy was more opposite to them, so she leant over and read. Sacred to the memory of George Cannon, who died in the hope of a glorious resurrection, on July the 29th, 1873, falling from the rocks at Kettleness. This stone was erected by his sorrowing mother to her dearly beloved son. He was the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. Really, Mr. Swells, I don't see anything very funny in that. She spoke her comment very gravely and somewhat severely. You don't see aught funny? Well, that's because you don't go on the sorrowing mother was a hellcat that hated him. He was a crooked, regular lamenter, he was, and he hated her so that he committed suicide in order that she mightn't get an insurance she put on his life. He blew nigh the top of his head off with an old musket that they had for scaring crows with. 'Twa'n't for crows then, for it brought the clegs and the dopes to him. That's the way he fell off the rocks, and so hopes of glorious resurrection. I've often heard him say myself that he hoped he'd go to hell, for his mother was so pious she'd be sure to go to heaven, and he didn't want to addle where she was. Now isn't that stone any rate? He hammered it with his stick as he spoke. A pack of lies. And won't it make Gabriel cackle when Geordie comes panting up the crease, with a tombstone balanced on his hump, and asked to be took as evidence? I did not know what to say, but Lucy turned the conversation, as she said, rising up, Oh, why did you tell us of this? It's my favourite seat, and I cannot leave it. And now I must go sitting over the grave of a suicide. That won't harm ye, my pretty, and it may make poor Geordie gladsome to have so trim a lass sitting on his lap. That won't hurt ye, why I've sat there often for nigh on 20 years past, and it hasn't done me no harm. Don't ye fash about them as lies under ye. Well, that doesn't lie here either. It'll be time for ye to be getting scarp when you see the tombstones all run away with, and the place as bare as a stubble field. There's the clock, and I must be gang. My service to you, ladies. And off he hobbled. Lucy and I sat a while, and it was all so beautiful before us that we took hands as we sat. She told me over and over again about Arthur and their coming marriage. That made me just a little heartsick, for I haven't heard from Jonathan for a whole month. The same day I came up here alone, for I am very sad. There was no letter for me. I hope there cannot be anything the matter with Jonathan. The clock has just struck 9. I see the lights scattered all over the town, sometimes in rows where the streets are, and sometimes singly. They run right up the Esk and die away in the curve of the valley. To my left, the view is cut off by a black line of roof of the old house next to the abbey. The sheep and the lambs are bleating in the fields away behind me. There is the clatter of donkeys' hooves up the paved road below. The band on the pier is playing a harsh waltz in good time, and further along the quay there is a Salvation Army meeting in a back street. Neither of the bands hears the other, but up here I hear and see them both. I wonder where Jonathan is, and if he is thinking of me. I wish he were here. Dr. Seward's Diary, 5th of June. The case of Renfield grows more interesting the more I get to understand the man. He has certain qualities very largely developed: selfishness, secrecy and purpose. I wish I could get at what the object is of the latter. He seems to have some settled scheme of his own, but what it is I do not know yet. His redeeming quality is a love of animals, though indeed he has such curious turns in it that I sometimes imagine he's only abnormally cruel. His pets are of odd sorts. Just now his hobby is catching flies. He has at present such a quantity that I have had myself to expostulate. To my astonishment, he did not break out into a fury as I expected, but took the matter in simple seriousness. He thought for a moment and said, "May I have 3 days? I shall clear them away." "Of course," I said. "That would do. I must watch him." 16th of June. He has turned his mind now to spiders. He's got several very big fellows in a box. He keeps feeding them with his flies, and the number of the latter is becoming sensibly diminished, although he has had to use half his food in attracting more flies from outside his room. 1st of July. His spiders are now becoming as great a nuisance as his flies, and today I told him that he must get rid of them. He looked very sad at this, so I said he must clear out some of them at all events. He cheerfully acquiesced in this, and I gave him the same time as before for reduction. He disgusted me much while with him, for when a horrid blowfly, bloated with some carrion food, buzzed into the room, he caught it, held it exultingly for a few moments between his finger and thumb, and before I knew what he was going to do, put it in his mouth and ate it. I scolded him for it, but he argued quietly that it's very good and very wholesome, that it was life, strong life, and gave life to him. This gave me an idea, or the rudiment, of one I must watch how he gets rid of his spiders. He has evidently some deep problem in his mind, for he keeps a little notebook in which he's always jotting down something. Whole pages of it are filled with masses of figures, generally single numbers, added up in batches, and then totals added in batches again, as though he were focusing some account, as the auditors put it. 8th of July. There is a method in his madness, and the rudimentary idea in my mind is growing. It will be a whole idea soon, and then, oh unconscious celebration, you will have to give the wall to your conscious brother. I kept away from my friend for a few days, so that I might notice if there were any change. Things remain as they were, except that he has parted with some of his pets and got a new one. He's managed to get a sparrow, and has already partially tamed it. His means of taming is simple. Already the spiders have diminished, and those that do remain, however, are well fed, for he still brings in the flies by tempting them with his food. 19th of July. We are progressing. My friend has now a whole colony of sparrows, and his flies and spiders are almost obliterated. When I came in, he ran to me and said he wanted to ask me a great favour, a very, very great favour. And as he spoke, he fawned on me like a dog. I asked him what it was. He said, with a sort of rapture in his voice and bearing, "A kitten, a nice little sleek, playful kitten that I can play with and teach and feed and feed and feed." I was not unprepared for this request, for I had noticed how his pets went on increasing in size and vivacity, but I did not care that his pretty family of tame sparrows should be wiped out in the same manner as the flies and the spiders. So I said I would see about it, and asked him if he would not rather have a cat than a kitten. His eagerness betrayed him as he answered, "Oh yes, I would like a cat. I only asked for a kitten lest you should refuse me a cat. No one would refuse me a kitten, would they?" I shook my head and said that at present I feared it would not be possible, but that I would see about it. His face fell, and I could see a warning of danger in it, for there was a sudden fierce sidelong look which meant killing. The man is an undeveloped homicidal maniac. I shall test him with his present craving to see how it will work out, then I shall know more. 10 p.m. I have visited him again and found him sitting in a corner brooding. When I came in, he threw himself on his knees before me and implored me to let him have a cat, that his salvation depended upon it. I was firm, however, and told him that he could not have it. Whereupon he went without a word, sat down